Somewhere out there right now, a team of developers is patching their favorite game. They're buffing a gun, nerfing a kill streak, fixing a hitbox nobody but the sweatiest player will ever notice. Your character is getting better while you're sleeping. There's only one question I want you to ask tonight. When's the last time somebody patched you? Not your loadout, you. Exactly. No one's coming to patch you. And that's the whole video, honestly. I just need a few thousand words to convince you it's true. I'm 34. I've been gaming almost 30 years, so I've earned the right to say this next part without sounding like some boomer take. The mistake gamers make isn't gaming. It's, we'll grind for 6 hours to unlock a camo nobody except us will look at closely, but we won't spend 20 minutes looking at our own bank statement. That's not a character flaw. That's just where intentionality gets pointed, and it can get repointed. So stick with me, because by the end of this, I want you to use the exact same grind instincts that got you that camo, just aim somewhere that actually pays you back. So I bought a new rig a while back, over $6,000, RTX 5080, 64 gigs of RAM, 4 terabytes of storage, and so on. It's an absurd machine, and I don't regret a dollar of it. But here's the part that actually matters for this video. I could tell you, why a 5080 beats a 4080, benchmark by benchmark, because I spent hours comparing them before I bought it. That's real research, like real intentionality, a $6,000 toy. So ask yourself a harder question. Could you explain what's actually inside your retirement account the same way? Not the number, the actual holdings. A lot of guys who researched a GPU, for 6 hours couldn't tell you the first thing about their own money. And that's not a coincidence, because researching a GPU has like a clean win state. Researching your finances feels like homework nobody assigned you. Imagine a guy who's 24, makes decent money, and tells himself he'll start investing when things settle down. Things never settle down. That's not a personal failure. That's just how life works. There's always a reason to wait. So waiting becomes the default setting. And 5 years disappear while he's telling himself the same thing. But the guy who starts putting even a small amount away, like a boring amount, ends up with dramatically more than the guy who just waits until his 30s to start seriously, not because he's smarter, just because he started the clock earlier. That's not a hot take. That's just what compounding actually does, quietly in the background, while nobody's watching, like XP that keeps accumulating when you're logged off. So here's the obvious pushback. It's a fair one. It's just a hobby, Justin. Let people enjoy things. And sure, nobody's broke because they bought one gaming PC. But the problem was never the $6,000. The problem is when that exact same brain, the one that compares price to performance for 6 hours straight, refuses to even spend 1 hour looking at his own financial situation. Your savings account doesn't glow purple and call you legendary when it hits a milestone. Honestly, maybe it should. Maybe that's the actual UX failure of adult life, right? But it doesn't. So the motivation has to come from you on purpose, same as everything else you've gotten good at. The skill required to compare specs on a $100 mouse is the exact same skill required to understand your own money. You've just never pointed it there, and that's not a talent gap, that's a patch you just haven't installed yet. There's a lazy idea going around that gamers are lazy, and I think that that's just wrong, and it's kind of insulting. I've watched people learn frame rate perfect movement tech, memorize spawn logic, learn entire game economies from scratch without anyone paying them $1 to do it. That's not laziness. That's the capacity to get good at something hard through repeated failure without quitting. But the capacity has been aimed at one target for years, and that's the actual problem, not the capacity itself. So here's the blunt version. If the honest answer is like, what have you gotten better at in the last 5 years, and it's just one game, I think to sit with that for a second, not to feel bad, just to notice it, because the capacity was never the issue. A couple of years back, I decided to build something like one app, something that did one specific job. I sat down the first night thinking, how hard can this be? I already know my way around a computer. Brutal. I spent 3 hours on one error message that turned out to be a missing semicolon. A semicolon. My son needed help finding a shoe, and I snapped at him because I was mad at a punctuation mark, which is a genuinely embarrassing sentence to say out loud on my own channel. But that exact feeling, I'm terrible at this, everyone online knows what they're doing, is identical to dropping into a new game day one. I just never clocked it as the same muscle. It took me over 2 months of showing up most nights before the thing actually worked. And I remember, fist pumping at my desk at 11 at night over something dumber than a final boss. Therefore, the lesson isn't learn to code. I think the lesson is that the beginner discomfort you already tolerate for free every time a new season drops, is the exact same discomfort blocking you from everything else you've been researching for years and just never started. Maybe this is you, or maybe it's your buddy, the guy who's been looking into starting a new business for 3 years, and every time you ask, it's still just research, still another video, still a course sitting unfinished. If you've been researching something for 3 years without attempting it, you're probably not researching anymore. I think you're hiding from being new at it because new is uncomfortable and research feels productive without ever risking the embarrassment of actually being bad at something in front of people. But you survived, you've survived every single time you queued into a new game and got destroyed the first few hours. So the skill's not missing. It's just parked, sitting there like a stat point you've earned but never spent. Your character doesn't get better because it wants to. It gets better because someone sits down and decides what the next patch fixes. Nobody's writing that patch for your actual abilities. That's on us. And now I want to talk about health. I water cooled the rig myself, tuned the fan by hand so the components don't degrade under load. That's a real thing I did on purpose to protect hardware that I actually care about. When's the last time you actually thought about your own airflow, sleep, water, actually standing up? Because your body is the hardware running that part of your brain that's good at games. And reaction time and patience, they run worse when you're on, a few hours of sleep and just whatever's fastest to eat between matches. There was a stretch of time where I'd get home, get on my computer, and basically not get up except for food. For no dramatic reason, just the chair is comfortable and the queue times are short. And 3 hours disappear before you notice it, and then your legs are all stiff. My wife made a pretty gentle comment one night, just, you've been sitting there since I got home. It wasn't a big confrontation, but it just stuck with me. So I've got this little dumb rule now. So every break, I'm up for 30 seconds instead of just sitting there. So it doesn't sound like much because it isn't much. It's just the difference between never thinking about it and actually deciding something, which is the whole idea of this video. Now, I'm not about to sit here and go tell you to run a marathon. I'm not training for anything either. So I'd be a hypocrite if I pretended otherwise. This has never been a fitness video, and it doesn't need to become one at this point. But there is a real difference between I'm choosing not to prioritize this right now and I never think about this at all. And one of those is a decision, and the other one's just neglect wearing a hoodie. You wouldn't run a $5,000 GPU on a busted power supply and expect peak performance. A lot of us are doing that to ourselves and just calling frame rate drops normal. So the fix isn't extreme. It's just noticing your own red zone the same way you notice your characters. Developers patch stamina bars and hit points because a character running on empty stops performing. Full stop. No exceptions. You're running the exact same system. Nobody ships a patch for that but you. But then we get to relationships. Now, multiplayer games are genuinely one of the last places a lot of guys still talk to their friends every single week. And I'm not knocking that because for a lot of people, that's real. Consistent social contact they otherwise wouldn't have. But ask yourself the harder version of that question. If the game disappeared tomorrow, how many of those friendships would actually survive? How many of those guys do you actually know versus just know them, online, their loadout, their mic setup? A friendship built entirely inside one activity is real, is just fragile because it's built on a game and not two of you specifically. Maybe this is you, maybe you know a guy. 6 people in the party chat every night and 0 people he'd actually call if his car broke down in the morning. It's not a character flaw either. It's just what happens when all your social effort gets spent in one channel for years straight quietly. But here's the actual tougher line. If you consistently give something 0 of your actual time, you might like the idea of it more than you're actually willing to do the work for it. And that's not an insult. This is what your calendar says about your priorities, whether you meant to or not. So here's the flip side, because I don't want this to sound like online friendships don't count, because they absolutely do. The skill of showing up for someone, checking in, remembering what's going on in their life, that's the exact same skill, whether it happens in a headset or across the table. It just needs to get spent in more places than one, because a friendship that only exists in one server has a single point of failure, and life has a way of finding the failure eventually. A job, a move, a console generation nobody agrees on. So the goal isn't fewer online friends. It's just making sure a couple of people in your relationships don't depend on a server staying online. Think about it like this. A game can patch a broken weapon in an afternoon. A friendship you let go quiet for 2 years doesn't patch that fast. So that one takes longer to fix than anything else in this entire video, which is why I think you should spend time working on it now instead of after the server shuts down. Now comes what I like to call the illusion of progress. Games are progress delivery machines. That's the entire design, right? XP bars, unlock trees, prestige icons, all of it. It's built to give your brain that hit of, I did something on a schedule that developers control, and it works incredibly well because the whole industry built by very smart people whose entire job it is to keep that feeling coming. But the feeling of progress and actual progress are two different things, and games are exceptionally good at giving you that one without the other. You can put 400 hours into a season and feel very genuinely like you accomplished something. Right? In a narrow sense, you got better at that specific game, but outside, nothing moved, right? Bank account's the same, resume's the same, body's the same, dopamine was real, and the progress mostly wasn't, at least not anywhere that follows you after you turn the game off. Real progress is slower and, way less satisfying in the moment, which is exactly why people avoid it in favor of the version that feels good immediately. Some guy puts on a nice shirt, updates their LinkedIn, and suddenly they're a strategic visionary. Meanwhile, they haven't actually built anything new in 2 years. Same trick as the game, just wearing a blazer instead of a headset. So here's the actual trade-off. Games give you that constant, reliable feedback, and real life gives you almost none of that until much later, which means if you ever only chase that feeling, you end up somewhere that feels like progress and isn't. And that gap, that feeling like you're moving and actually moving, is exactly where the next problem lives, quietly, without an alarm clock to go off to tell you. Here's the one thing that games have that life doesn't, a reset button. Died, respawn. Bad game, requeue, no worries. No consequences carried over. Next lobby in 90 seconds. That's actually part of why games feel so good. Real stakes in the moment and then completely erased 5 minutes later. No scar tissue, no memory of the loss. Life doesn't work like that, and I think a lot of us know it, and we just don't sit with it because sitting with it is uncomfortable, right? In a way like losing a match never is. There's no requeue in your 30s. There's no patch that retroactively fixes 5 years you spent not building anything outside the game. Like picture the version of you 45 looking back right now. Not in a doom and gloom way, just genuinely picture it for a second. He's either looking back at a stretch where something outside the game actually moved, or he's looking back at a very well-optimized loadout and not much else. Both versions of that guy had the same exact starting stats. Difference isn't talent and it's not luck. It's just where the hours are spent, one ordinary evening at a time, none of which feels like a big decision in the moment, right? And we only get one run. The clock doesn't pause while we decide whether to take it seriously. I could be wrong about plenty in this video. I don't think I'm wrong about that one. I'm not telling you to quit your gaming, obviously, like you can literally see me playing in the background here. I think the fix isn't less gaming. It's more just having places more outside the game where you actually feel capable and challenged and connected. The exact same things the game is literally already giving you for free. So I don't think we need like personality transplants. I think we just need one area in our life with the same intentionality you already give to like a new weapon build. Pick one thing, money, a skill, your body, a friendship, and give it a season the same way you'd commit to ranking up one game instead of splitting up your hours across 5. Actually track it. Notice the small wins, the same way a level up notification catches your eye when it's a small one. Let yourself be bad at it for the first month because you already know how to survive that. Being bad at something new, you've learned that many, many times with every single game that you've ever loved and survived it every single time. Your character gets a patch every couple weeks, whether you log in or not, because a whole team is out there deciding it's worth the work. No one's doing that for us. So I invite you to write your own patch notes tonight, even if it's one thing you're going to fix this week in one part of the build that's been running on default settings for years. No one's coming to patch you. That's our job. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.